How's everybody doing tonight? Welcome to Facebook land. Hope everybody's doing good tonight. We got Friday night. It's Friday, folks. It's Friday. Imagine that. So, some of the things we want to talk about tonight. We want to talk about national debt. You know, one of those things. It's a big issue, right? National debt. How much do we owe? Okay, and the second thing that we actually want to talk about, let's go ahead and mention that here real quick. Get that up and running is federal corporate protections. Yep, federal corporate protections. Okay, so before we get into those, let's go ahead and go through the normal spiel. You know the drill. Like, love, share, comment. Please, by all means, comment. I want to know what your thoughts are. Let's go ahead and discuss this, intelligent way so that you understand exactly where it is I'm coming from when I discuss these issues and what it is I would like to see done, and give me your perspective. It's important. We need to get all the stakeholders at the table, and we need to come up with a solution that's fair and equitable for everybody. And I do mean fair and equitable for everybody. You don't get to put your thumb on the scale and say, this is the way I want it done. So let's go ahead. Something that came up earlier. Let me see if I can go ahead and find it here real quick. But let's go ahead and do this, because the one topic I want to come up with here is going to be this one. Okay. So for those of you who paying attention, yeah, you see that? You see that? Ooh, look at that. Look at that. Okay, so that's the U.S. federal debt. Take a look at those numbers there. So, scroll up. Looks like I may have to scroll down a little bit just so you guys can see the whole thing. Okay, look at that. The U.S. debt clock. We're scrolling through that. $27 trillion. Holy guacamole. Yeah. Take a look at that. U.S. national debt, the debt clock. It's paying attention to what's going on there right now. 27 trillion and climbing. Now, you saw my meme the other day. How's the duopoly working for you? Right? How's the duopoly working for you? Well, funny thing about that particular meme was we were using one of the older charts. That older chart was projecting 27 trillion another 4 years down the road. We're already at 27 trillion, 4 years ahead of schedule. Woo! Yeah. Which means that 4 years from now, this is going to be closer to 30 trillion if we don't do something drastic. Let's admit it. It's going to take something drastic in order to reverse what we got going on here with our U.S. debt clock. Just reality, folks. You take a look at this. Debt per taxpayer. Dude, the United States government has decided that your home is essentially theirs. I mean, that's what we're looking at right now. $216,000 per person. I don't know that you can find a 1,500 square foot home in the continental United States for that price right now. Maybe in a few locations. Go out and throw up some mason blocks and call it a house. I suppose maybe. But I mean, $216,000 per U.S. taxpayer. Now, if you're in a dual income household, that's 432. That literally is a standard house here in the Treasure Valley. Federal revenue. Take a look here. Gross domestic product. Total federal, state, local spending. Okay, so this is tracking pretty quick, but I mean, we're into October here. We're fiscally third quarter, and we're at let's see, million, billion, trillion. We're at 9 trillion in spending already this year. State debt. Now, of course, this is cumulative because you're looking at all of the different debts. You have what is actually the national debt. That's the federal debt that we're looking at. That's the 27 trillion. U.S. federal tax revenue, total state revenue, revenue per citizen, payroll taxes, yada, yada, yada. But our state debt, that's all 50 states. Our states are in debt to the tune of, $1.2 trillion, all of our states. Our cities, okay, our cities and county governments, we are looking at a debt of $2.1 trillion. And that's even before we start getting into the federal debt. So, I mean, seriously, how do we keep doing this? How? If we actually go back and we take a look at any of the economics, if you ever studied economics in college, or even, your little high school class, you understand that what we're doing is not feasible. Okay. It is not sustainable. And then at some point we actually got to step back and go, you know what, folks, trip back to home ec class, figure out how to fit everything in the budget, fit our revenue into the budget. And that doesn't even take into consideration all of the revenue that was lost this year as a result of the lockdowns. Lockdowns, a lot of taxpayers didn't pay taxes this year, not on the level that they were accustomed to because they couldn't go to work, right? 4 trillion in revenue, of which, less than $1 billion actually made it to your lowest level. Most of it went to corporate welfare, right? Bail out the big guys because they're going to keep all of you employed with the Payroll Protection Act. How many of you still have jobs now that that Payroll Protection Act has ran out? And guess what? Those corporations are still keeping that money. Funny how that worked. But so we're looking at 27 trillion in debt, 4 years ahead of schedule. What was supposed to be a projection for 2024, 2027, out there, it's here now already. 4 years ahead of schedule, $27 trillion. And there's no sign of it letting up. Reason why is because they got to keep printing the money. They got to keep creating this debt in order to maintain this economy, to keep their friends, their corporate CEOs, heads above water, which is another one of those things that's funny. I can't remember, something like the 8 richest men in America, the 8, came close to, during the first 6 months, their total wealth increased $800 billion. Okay. Food insecurity, housing insecurity, all across the United States right now. And the 8 richest men net worth increased $800 billion. Somebody's playing with an awful lot of funny money out there, folks. And they're stealing from you in order to do that. There is no way, if you were playing by legitimate economic rules, Austrian rules, free economy rules, that what has happened in the first 6 months of 2020 should have resulted in what is happening right now. This is straight up Keynesian corporate protectionism. This is how lobbyists become cost effective for corporations in the United States. And so, there we go. That's my 10 minutes of that, folks. U.S. debt. It's real. It's huge. It's 27 trillion. It's 4 years ahead of schedule. Yep. We aren't going to fix that anytime soon. Reason why 27 trillion right now? Federal corporate protections. We bailed a bunch of suckers out. We did. Their business model failed. We bailed them out. Same thing we did 4 years ago. Same thing we did 4 years before that and 4 years before that. At some point, you see this number here, this 216, almost 217,000 per taxpayer. Yes. That's your bill for what Congress is spending right now. Keep that in mind. Yeah. And that's in addition to the 9,000 that we're taking per citizen. Not even per taxpayer. We're taking $9,000 per citizen. Yeah, every year, U.S. federal tax revenue. Whew. But we're bailing out corporations, folks. Does that sound fair to you? Your friends who are running small businesses right now. Yep, they're bankrupt. People they were doing services for, it's what Amazon's doing it for them now. Some other major corporation is now taking care of those services for them. Your friends who are running small businesses, your friends who are running small retail, no longer going to salons. You're all going to the JCPenney. Well, okay, not JCPenney's, because JCPenney's went bankrupt, thanks to some corporate raiders a little while back. But, Walmart, your Walmart salon. Yeah. They're in the process right now of replacing all of those little community salons. Your neighborhood hairdressers. Hi, Dana. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it. Anything you want to talk about today? Yeah, so absolutely. Love it that you guys are watching. It's a good thing going on. Really do appreciate it. And this is part of the whole like, share, comment thing so that we can all get involved and pay attention to what's going on in our lives, in our government. Come to a consensus. What do we need to do to fix it? Who do we need to elect to fix it? This is one of the reasons why we got an awful lot of libertarians right now. And right now, libertarian podcasts are a dime a dozen. I'm just one of another, 20 dozen out there. Literally every libertarian has a podcast these days. Sad to say, but it's the truth. But it's because right now, we need the truth to get out there, more so now than ever before. Rob, Progressive Democrat. Love you, man. State of Connecticut. Now, the fact that you're a Democrat, dude, you're fighting an uphill battle. You don't change things like that from inside. I understand what you're trying to do. More power to you. But that's institutional inertia you're fighting, man. That's a lot of institutional inertia you're fighting. But Connecticut, District 42, whew. Good luck. Wish you luck on that race. And only because you're a progressive, not because you're a Democrat. We need to do what we can about reducing costs, reducing expenditures. We need to fix this Keynesian system, break it down. But I think that's one of those things you completely understand, even though you're coming at it from the other side. This is one of those things. Robert's one of those, feel sorry for you, Robert. I've been doing this, looking at what's going on for about 6 years, doing community organizing, a lot of different things here in our community, trying to understand how all of the pieces fit together. And part of the problem, okay, Robert, one of the things that you run into when you're out there in Connecticut, it's Eastern Seaboard. You have a huge urban influence. The problem sets that you're looking at in Connecticut are urban problems. They are. They're straight up urban. They're gentrification issues. in urban America. Even though it's Connecticut, I recognize Connecticut's already a little bit up on the gentrified scale, big incomes. But the thing is you're still looking at urban issues. And there is a problem in America with urban issues. Absolutely 100%. Not going to deny that. But we also got to take a look at what the problem is with rural America too. Okay, so we need to get together and we actually need to come up with solutions that work for both rural America, like out here in Idaho, where 99% of the state is actually rural. We got like 1 million people in the Treasure Valley and 250,000 throughout the rest of the state. But we need to look at rural or small agricultural farmers. But one of the things about Connecticut, a lot of rural Americans don't understand this about the East Coast or even about the West Coast, is just how critical small businesses are to making things happen in those areas. You start getting out into rural America and, we used to have the small mom and pops that would run things. And then we reached a point where Walmart would come in, the big box stores would come in these communities of a specific size and larger. Okay. Walmart, Home Depot, Lowe's, the rest of those big box stores, they don't bother with communities that are smaller. They got a minimum size community that they will become part of, because their model isn't profitable in communities any smaller than that. Okay. That's a very harsh truth. But the thing is on the East Coast, there is no community too small for a Walmart or a Home Depot to come in and wreck the local economy and the big businesses. Jason, absolutely. Small farms. The corporate farms, huge bloodsuckers, huge bloodsuckers. Matter of fact, they are one of the most exploitive of agricultural labor in the United States. And we're actually losing the ability to import labor simply because of how exploitive those big farms are. It used to be the small family farms. They'd set up, housing. Okay, so it's like army barracks. Little brick buildings for the time of year, may or may not have air conditioning. But they'd actually set it up. The way we deal with the corporate farms these days, the housing that they have for the temporary agricultural workers to come through during harvest season or during planting season when the big machines can't actually do the work. It's extremely exploitive, and you're funny, Jason. You're funny. And I only say that because that I know that that middle-class Americans don't work that job. Never, ever. It's almost exclusively immigrant workers that come in and actually do agricultural work, simply because of how fast, how hard, and how exploitative it is. It really is. It's extremely exploitative. And until we actually get into a situation where we are once again working with small family farms that are being respected by the companies that purchase their produce, build the wall, build the wall. Come on, Jason. Even Ammon Bundy admits the wall's a bad idea. And of course, it took us a little bit to explain to him that if the wall went up, all of that labor he likes to exploit would go away. There's something about West Coast ranchers. They still need cowboys to go out and round up the cattle. And a lot of those cowboys are actually immigrants these days. He needs that cheap labor. We got an awful lot of agriculture all up and down. They know better than to build that wall. Which, of course, is one of the reasons why I, as a libertarian, I support the open borders movement, immigration. Somebody wants to work here in America, by all means, come work. Please, please come work. We got jobs for you that no American will do. At least not yet. They aren't hungry enough yet. Maybe give them another year. Another year of COVID lockdown, a little bit of food insecurity. Some of them may actually think that, going out and working the farm, working for their own food, may actually be a way forward. But not yet. Not yet. But yeah. So this close the border thing, build the wall, folks. No, don't. Yeah. Talked a little bit about that yesterday. Open borders, just like defund the police, it's a hashtag for a movement. And like all hashtag movements, it's tends towards modification as the words in the hashtag start to bother people. Oh, Jason. Oh, yeah. No, I can't. Honestly, I can't. No. I know some people. Idaho's rural enough. We still got some farm kids, grew up farm kids, who have gone out and, cleaned the rocks out of the potato fields after a harvest time, sifting between rocks and potatoes and, and collecting the rocks and some other farm things. I grew up driving the tractor until I was old enough to actually buck hay. But yeah, even that compared to some of the stuff I've seen done on the farms, even the farmers' sons and daughters, they don't actually work the field. They drive the combine. They drive the tractor. They get the easy job. Someone else is out there actually picking the plants, doing the bundling, doing the twisting, throwing things into nah, come on, dude. You and I know Karen and, her kids aren't going to be out there. Not till they get really, really hungry. Actually getting them to go out and pick fresh fruit for their strawberry jam in the fall, which we do. We got some communities here in the state of Idaho that still do that. Some church farms, LDS. If you're LDS, yes. We got a lot of farms, cooperatives. Hard to exactly say what it is, but we got a lot of cooperatives where people can actually go out and they pick their own. The church asks for 10% of everything. That is the tithe. And sometimes that 10% happens to be 10% of the land of a farmer's land, and it's allocated for a church garden, church farm. And you get volunteers to go out and collect and, pick fresh and turn around and can it. Some of that goes into your own storage. Some of it's collected and put into, the pool. It took close to about 6 months, but when Libby and one of the other major canning companies actually went in and forced everybody to upgrade their canning equipment, the LDS canneries here in Boise and in Utah got hit particularly hard because we were running all volunteers, and there were certain policies about what could and couldn't enter the garden, enter the cannery, etc., what sort of certifications the volunteers needed. The original legislation was intended to shut down the volunteer canneries that actually affected food prices here, where Deseret Industries was actually selling, this volunteer in order to bring income into the church for a while. The idea of these canneries was to shut down the volunteer canneries that the churches were running. Well, they did for about 6 months. But the LDS church actually got the canneries back up and running, and it's not quite as affordable as it used to be. Simply because a lot of the rules weren't actually real rules. They were just creating barriers to entry. You didn't actually need those rules in order to do the canning, do the volunteer farm work, being able to preserve that food later on down the road for the communities. So yeah, we actually had government protectionism once again affecting the church of all things by state regulation, of which we were supposed to have separation of church and state. Imagine that. Okay, don't get me wrong, there are certain aspects of religious freedom that are practiced here in the state of Idaho that I do firmly disagree with. You know, come on, folks. If your kid has a broken arm, get them to the hospital to get the arm set. You aren't going to fake heal that. Doesn't work. Doesn't matter how many times, it happens. Apparently, we got people who still think that fake healing works on broken arms. Folks, come on. There are limits. There are limits. God gave man wisdom for a reason. Use it. But yeah, no, but yeah, so the federal corporate protectionisms, when the food canning industry lobby went to Congress and said, church canneries are affecting our bottom line. We need you to put them out of business. Congress went to work on putting church canneries out of business. ZCMI. You're hurting me here. No, I don't remember that one right offhand, although I'm sure it won't take me too long to figure that out. Ooh, yeah. Zion's Cooperative Mercantile Institution, ZCMI. Brigham Young. And of course, you realize anything attached to Brigham Young. Right? Okay. So, yeah, LDS communism. It was church-based communism. We were actually the LDS church. What exactly is? My mom keeps telling me it, and but it's like the communion or something, But what it is the church elders, the LDS elders. If you are a member of the LDS, even today, the Latter-day Saints, even today, if the quorum of elders comes to you and says, give us everything, you give them everything. Not just the 10% tithe. If they come to you and say, we need everything, you give it. It's just gone. That's the rules. It is a religious-based communism. Complete with a central planning committee. The elders, quorum of the 12, the quorum of the 70. This is the LDS Central Planning Committee for the greater good. Okay. Now, when Brigham Young came out west and set it up, the great holy city of Salt Lake, and got everything organized and built the temple, that was a relatively small organization. So literally at the time, the LDS Church could function as a communist organization and support everybody within the LDS community. If somebody came in and they were able to, and this was during the early settler days, yes. Yeah, Jason, I know you're going to slam me a little bit for this. Reason why is because the LDS Church were some of the worst colonizers of the era in the westward movement. Matter of fact, it was the Mormon army that actually came up, and the one battle of the Civil War that happened here in the state of Idaho was by a group of Salt Lake volunteers that came up from Salt Lake, and that was part of the Mormon army, came up and basically committed a massacre over at Bear Creek. Yep, the Fetterman's Massacre. Yeah, but yeah, no, the LDS were some of the worst colonizers of the era. But what they did was, when they came over, was they used an awful lot of the settler protections, the land right protections that this manifest destiny created here in the United States, and they came over and they laid claim to land. Well, the initial settlers that came in and laid claim to that land, laid claim to maximum amount of land that was possible. As you moved on later and more people came into the area, they realized that there was an awful lot of this land that was claimed that wasn't actually being used. So the elders of the quorum would actually go in and say, okay, you're not using this 20 acres of your allocated, 100. You need to give it to the new guys, so that they can work it. And we actually had the elders of the quorum go in and dictate what people did with the land that they staked claim to via the federalized westward movement, manifest destiny that displaced an awful lot of the indigenous people through Idaho and Utah, and well, all of the West. We ran into that entire problem. But literally, the LDS Church. So for every one of you out there who's LDS, who's pro-profiteering, who's pro-capitalism, dude, no, don't come at me with that. I know better. Yeah, the LDS Church is founded, and it still exists, on communist principles. 100% socialism, complete with the central planning committee that dictates how you will and will not spend your money. Every one of those LDS elders that got rich with PharmaCore, investments, they invested their money at that because the elders told them to. So, yeah, your LDS, don't come at me with, capitalism is the best thing ever. The LDS Church would not be where it is today if it wasn't for the form of communism that it practiced when Joseph Smith and Brigham Young came out west. It was like Jason said, it was communism. Straight up, man. Straight up communism. But yeah. The LDS Church, the Mormon Church, they actually had a standing army that was part of their community in the westward expansion, and federal agents actually called on them on a fairly regular basis in support of a number of westward movements, and that included displacing indigenous people all across the western region, vicinity of Salt Lake City and eastern Idaho, and yeah. Not one of the prouder things about the church, folks. I discovered this car. How many of you seen that video? I think it's a TikTok. Guy comes out to find somebody's discovered his car. This guy tried stealing. No, I discovered it. I discovered it. Walking down, door was open. I discovered it. No, no. Westward expansion. Stolen land. Yes, I'm a supporter of that. I do believe that is what happened. Reparations need to occur, dude, but that's going to get really complicated about how that happens, right, Jason? How do you go about fixing something that screwed up? It's been that screwed up for generations. Yeah. That said, the Democrats and Republicans aren't going to make it happen, no matter how much you want it to. Too much money invested in all that land that's been acquired via westward expansion in eminent domain and all the other grand things that we called it manifest destiny. Whew. Too many generations removed. It's all right. We've seen some things that have actually succeeded. A lot of couples in Seattle area, a lot of rich people who either haven't had children or realized their children just grew up to be ungrateful, uh, and conniving and self-righteous and just mean-spirited, and some other people like that that have actually acquired the land, um, land back. Everyone back to Europe, Asia, Africa. I've seen that. I've seen that. Um, we'll work on that. That's something we can work with. I'm not sure how practical that is, especially, that full range, that full scope as far as land back goes. But one of the things I was talking about is a lot of these a lot of these people, these older couples who have acquired property over the years, either because they don't have children or because they realize their children are ungrateful and don't deserve what they've acquired, have literally ceded the land that the United States government and the states have granted possession of. They've ceded those lands back to indigenous tribes that were associated with that region. So yes, oh yeah, the idea is there. Give your land back to the people who originally occupied it, and that's what we're talking about right now. Those people who own it, who for whatever reason have decided not to pass it on to their lineage. They're actually giving it back to the people who occupied it. This is the top result. Interesting. Okay. Weird. Okay, my phone decided to be screwy on me. But absolutely. Give the land back to the people who originally occupied it. And we've seen that in a number of places. Oklahoma's in an interesting situation, especially with Amy Barrett, going back on the seat. If she actually occupies that, the most recent decision made by the Supreme Court regarding Oklahoma land, there was a Supreme Court decision that actually turned most of Oklahoma back over to the indigenous. It was Indian land before. We violated the contract. We violated the treaty, and they made a declaration that all that land is indigenous land again. Well, that was actually a Supreme Court appeal in a criminal case. Rather disgusting criminal case, but it's one of those with a weird appeal that, managed to benefit significantly more than it hurt. But the Supreme Court gave back most of the state of Oklahoma. Problem is Oklahoma state law is now in the process of trying to challenge that because of certain laws written by the EPA that granted the state of Oklahoma control over indigenous lands, which just went back to indigenous lands. So it's going to be interesting, especially if Amy ends up sitting on the seat, how she's going to rule. The 1970s Environmental Protection Act relates in relationship to granting Oklahoma state control over indigenous properties based off of treaty violations that pre-existed the EPA. Yeah. Did you think about Amy's influence on that one, Jason? Yeah, I see the smoke. I see the smoke. But if Amy takes the seat, is the state of Oklahoma going to go back and challenge that original ruling? Reason why is because that ruling is less than a year old. It doesn't have 50 years of case law like Roe versus Wade. So that one ruling that gave Oklahoma back to the indigenous people by the Supreme Court of the United States could head back to the Supreme Court with Amy Barrett sitting on it and making a completely different ruling than Ruth Bader did. We'll see. But in the meantime, he said, land back and give it back to the people who originally occupied it, especially if you know your children are ungrateful. Right? You know, do it. Land back. It is a thought. It is a movement. And there are ways that we can make it happen. We've talked about it a number of different places. And a lot of it has to come with the ideas as far as how the land is managed. Okay. We got an awful lot of indigenous wisdom, that exists out there with regards to land management. The way we manage the land, the way we control the land. Tribal stories that go back and back and back and back, way back, before the Environmental Protection Act, and way back even before any of those things. And a lot of the people with the land back movement, aren't actually interested in taking ownership of the land in the same way that the Westerner, never mind the fact that we aren't Westerners, we're actually Easterners, we're all Eurocentric, but that Eurocentric mentality of land ownership, the indigenous concept of land ownership is completely different. And it's one of those things we can take a look at because we have significant tracts of land, national wilderness, wildlands, Bureau of Land Management, all of these in which indigenous land management wisdom can be applied to. So in a lot of ways you give management back. Again, this is multi-purpose, because you recreate on it, you hunt on it, you conduct agricultural, healthy agricultural. I'm not talking Monsanto style agriculture, but there's ways that we can incorporate the tribes back into the land management of a lot of these areas that are currently being managed by the United States Department of Agriculture, United States Department of Interior. Give back the tribes management of these historical lands so that they can actually do a better job of, and this goes back to one of my big complaints about the way we are currently doubling down on 40 years of environmental protection policies that have created a royal mess of the forests of the Pacific Northwest. And I'm not talking like the clear-cut forestry that we used to do or some of the other things that we used to do with regards to land management. I'm talking about literally the policies of don't touch, which have created ecological disasters all across the Pacific Northwest, well, across the entirety of the Western United States. So we're dealing with that. We got indigenous wisdom we can call on to actually go in and fix an awful lot of these environmental problems that have developed in the last 40 years, which were largely based off of Eurocentric policies that really weren't based on a lifetime of science. They were concepts, they were ideas that were fresh out of school. They hadn't really been tested. Or if they had been tested, they had been tested all of about 5 years in a very small region. We actually need to go back and say, okay, well, we've tried it for 40 years, and for the last 40 years, it didn't work quite like it did the first 5. Yeah. But there's things we can do as far as incorporating land management and actually facilitating an awful lot of things that goes back into the land back movement. I just want it better managed. But, and I can't speak for everybody in the land back movement because there are an awful lot of different opinions in it, a lot of different ideas about exactly what the reparations should be like, what they should look like. Or some of them are hardcore and they don't really care about the people who would be displaced if certain policies or procedures were to be followed. Welcome to the anger, rage, and division again. But, okay. So I've been rattling here for 45 minutes. Thank you again for joining me tonight, Jason. Really appreciate the conversation, especially the points you brought up. The land back and what we do with our national wildernesses and wildlands and how to go in and properly manage those is a big issue. You know, the fact that literally the bulk of Idaho and Utah were communist before we actually became states. You know, it's one of the reasons why, you know, the LDS elders of the 1970s were very much in favor of the libertarian platform when it came out. Yes, believe it or not, the LDS Church was very pro-libertarian in 1970 when we came out with the libertarian platform against Nixon. You step back and you take a look at a lot of the philosophies that were coming out of the elders from the 19th, you know, and I'm talking the elders, the Quorum of 12, you know, and the prophet. A lot of the philosophies that were coming out of there, you know, back in the 1970s, it was a mirror of the 1970s libertarian movement. You know, you were looking at philosophies like Hayek and Friedman and, you know, a number of these other things that wanted to get government out. And one of the reasons why they were big about getting government out of religion was because of the way the Mormons were disenfranchised here in the state of Idaho when then President appointed the committee to create the state of Idaho. Yes, the original Constitution left a lot of Mormons out. But yeah, that is what it is. So thank you again for joining me tonight on my long-winded conversation. Again, thank you, Jason. Everybody else, Dana, Robert, appreciate you guys stepping in, saying hi, love you. Keep doing the work, keep doing the organizing. You know, it doesn't stop with the election. You know, you need to keep working local, you need to keep working state, you need to keep working federal. Work on getting your candidates, work on getting your people. You know, and because people are stronger than money. They are. The money's fickle. The people aren't. Especially when you do the proper organizing. Keep them strong, keep the faith. Remember, family, friends, community. Together we can make America free again. And yeah, Jason, I know exactly how you feel about that. When was it free? But we're working on it. We're working on fixing it. I love you guys.